Hi everybody, I am going to talk about the impact of disability. The term disability is considered to be a part of human condition. Every individual at some point experience some form of either temporary or permanent impairment in life situation. Those who experience permanent impairment and survive till old age tend to experience increasing difficulties in day-to-day functioning and in the process of socialization. In the earlier times, the joint family system existed and it was a great source of support, care and warmth to the individuals living with disability, because the other members in the family who had no form of disability shouldered the responsibilities of providing support and concern. The nuclear family system in the present era is becoming a great challenge to individuals living with disability due to the fact that the number of people in a nuclear family system is very less. Contemporary society views the people with disability sympathetically but considers them to be unproductive and burdensome. In many families, the disability as a condition is associated with a religious belief and treated as a curse to their family by the divine power. All these misconceptions and branding led the persons with disability to lead a life unproductive and dependent. This disabling condition challenges the physical and social conditions and hampers the full participation of individuals in society and the enjoyment of equal rights and opportunities. Individuals living with disabilities are denied access to human rights, inclusion, communication, basic facilities such as healthcare, education and employment, despite the pronouncement of the international and national rights of the persons with disability. Given the magnitude of the problem, it is important that persons with disability must receive greater socio-economic and political attention. At the end of this talk, you may gain adequate knowledge about the impact of disability on individuals, understand the impact of disability on family, and learn the impact caused by disability on the society. Let me explain the impact of disability on individuals. It is a well-known fact that disability can have lasting impact on an individual. In addition to cognitive impairment, other characteristics of disabilities can create ambiguity and uncertainty for individuals and also to their families. The young adults face difficulties in family decisions such as whether to marry and whether to have children. In more extreme cases related to severe medical conditions, persons may have their lives extended by using the advancements in biomedical science and technology. When this happens, families are in a dilemma and find it very difficult to take decisions about what techniques and equipment should be used for how long, with what expected gains, at what cost, and so on. In addition to the type of impairment, there is variability in the severity of impairment. The degree to which a person with a disability is limited in performing certain activities or functions of daily living, such as walking, feeding oneself, toileting, can be assessed and is called functional status. The lower the person's functional status, the more assistance he or she will need from other people or from equipment and devices. Family members are a primary source of this needed assistance. Providing this assistance can create a burden for family caregivers, which may result in physical or psychological symptoms of poor health. For the parents, especially the mothers, experience more depression when their children with disabilities have lower functional status. For the elderly caregivers, physical strain may be a limiting factor in how much and for how long assistance can be provided for the disabled individual. Let me describe the impact of disability of children on their parents. When the condition of disability is present from birth, the child's life and identity are shaped around the disability. In some ways, it may be easier for a child and his or her family to adjust to never having certain functional abilities than to a sudden loss of abilities later. For example, a child with a spina bifida, a congenital malformation in which there is something wrong with the bone in the vertebral column, will adapt differently than a child who suddenly becomes a paraplegic in adolescence due to an injury. The age of the parents when a child's disability is diagnosed is also an important consideration in how the family responds. For example, teenage parents are at greater risk for experiencing poor adaptation because their own developmental needs are still prominent, and they are less likely to have the maturity and resources to cope with the added demands of the child. For older parents, there is a greater risk of having a child with certain disabilities such as Down syndrome. Older parents may lack the stamina for the extra burden of care required, and they may fear their own mortality and be concerned about who will care for their child after their death. The course of the child's physical, psychological, and social development will forever be altered by the chronic condition. Since development proceeds sequentially, and since relative success at mastering the tasks of one stage is a prerequisite for facing the challenges of the next stage, one could anticipate that the earlier the onset, the greater the adverse impact on development. The accomplishment of development tasks is complicated for persons with disability. This in turn has an effect on their families as well as on which family roles can be assumed by the person with disability. During infancy, disability may frighten parents, or the infant may be unresponsive to their nurturing efforts such that attachment and bonding necessary for the development of trust are compromised. The parent may feel inadequate as a caregiver and parenting competence is undermined. For a toddler, active exploration of the social environment needed to develop a sense of autonomy and self-control may be restricted because of the child's motor, sensory, or cognitive deficits. Parents fearing injury or more damage to their young child may restrict their child's efforts to explore and learn, or they may overindulge the child out of sympathy or guilt. If other people react negatively to the child's disability, parents may try to compensate by being overly protective or overly solicitous. Such parent behaviors further compromise the child's development of autonomy and self-control. As children with disabilities move into school environment where they interact with the teachers and peers, they may experience difficulties mastering tasks and developing social skills and competencies. Although schools are mandated to provide special education programs for children in the least restrictive environment and to maximize integration, there is still considerable variability in how effectively schools do this. Children with disabilities face barriers such as inadequate financing for special education, inadequately trained school personnel, attitudinal barriers of other children, poor access to infrastructure that compromise full inclusion for students with disabilities. Parents of children with disabilities may experience a whole set of added challenges in assuring their children's educational rights. In some instances, conflict with the schools and other service providers can become a major source of strain for the individuals and also for their families. Let me talk about the impact of disability on adolescents and young adults. Developmental tasks of adolescents, developing an identity and developing greater autonomy, are particularly difficult when the adolescent has a disability. Part of this process for most adolescents generally involves some risk-taking behaviors such as smoking and drinking. Adolescents with a disability take risks too, sometimes defying treatment and procedures related to their condition, such as skipping medications or changing a prescribed diet. Issues related to sexuality may be particularly difficult because the person with a disability has fears about his or her desirability to a partner, sexual performance, and worries about ever getting married or having children. There is some evidence that girls may be at greater risk for pregnancy because of their desire to disavow their disability and prove their normalcy. Teens with mental impairment may be subjected to sexual exploitation by others. When disability sets in young adulthood, the person's personal, family, and vocational plans for the future may be altered significantly. If the young adult has a partner where there is a long-term commitment, this relationship may be in jeopardy, particularly if the ability to enact adult roles as a sexual partner, parent, financial provider, or leisure partner is affected. When a couple has just begun to plan a future based on the assumption that both partners would be fully functional, they may find the adjustment to the disability too great to handle. The development of a relationship with a significant other after the disability already present is more likely to lead to positive adjustment. Young adulthood is that critical transition from one's family of origin to creating a new family unit with a partner and possibly children. When disability occurs at this stage, the young adult's parents may become the primary caregivers, encouraging or bringing the young person home again. The risk is that the developmental course for the young adult and his or her parents may never get back on track. This is influenced in part by the extent to which there are independent living options for persons with disabilities to make use of in the community. Let me describe the impact of disability on adults and their families. When the onset of disability occurs to adults in their middle years, it is often associated with major disruption to career and family roles. Those roles are affected for the person with a disability as well as for other family members who have come to depend on him or her to fulfill those roles. Some kind of family reorganization of roles, rules, and routines is usually required. If the person has been employed, he or she may have to give up work and career entirely, or perhaps make dramatic changes in the volume and type of work. The family may face a major loss of income as well as a loss in health. If the person is a parent, childbearing responsibilities may be altered significantly. The adult may have to switch from being the nurturer to being the nurtured. This may leave a major void in the family for someone to fill the nurturing role. If the person is a spouse, the dynamics of this relationship will change as one person is unable to perform as independently as before. The partner with a disability may be treated like another child. The sexual relationship may change. Plans for having more children may be abandoned, and lifestyle and leisure may be altered. Some spouses feel that their marital contract has been violated and they are unwilling to make the necessary adjustments. Children of a middle-aged adult with a disability also experience shift of role. Their own dependency and nurturing needs may be neglected. They may be expected to take on some adult roles such as caring for younger children, doing household chores, or maybe even providing some income. How well the family's efforts at reorganization work depend ultimately on the family's ability to accommodate age-appropriate developmental needs. In families where there is more flexibility among the adults in assuming the different family roles, adjustment is likely to be better. Let me mention about the impact of disability on the elderly. The onset of disability in old age is more expectable as bodily functions deteriorate. This decline in physical function is often associated with more depression. An older person may live for many years needing assistance in daily living, and the choices of where to get that assistance are not always easily made. Spouses may be unable to meet the extra caretaking needs indefinitely as their own health and stamina decline. Adult children are often in a position of deciding where their elderly parent or parents should live when they can no longer care for them. Having their parents move in with them or having them move to a nursing home or seniors residence are the most common options. However, each of these choices carries with it emotional, financial, and social costs to the elderly person as well as to his or her adult children. This responsibility for elderly parents is not always shared among adult children. Adult daughters are more likely to be involved in providing direct care for their elderly parents than adult sons. The many decisions and responsibilities can be sources of tension, conflict, and resentment among extended family members. This period of disability in old age can go on for a very long time given the medical capability to sustain life. While the practice is still not widespread, more elderly people are preparing a living will, which is a legal document preventing extraordinary means from being used to prolong their lives. Let me discuss about the impact of disability on family. Disability places a set of extra demands or challenges on the family system, and most of these demands last for a long time. Many of these challenges cut across disability type, age of the person with the disability, and type of family in which the person lives. There is a financial burden associated with getting health education, social services, buying or renting equipment, devices, transportation, medications, and special food. Coordination of services among different providers such as a physician, developmental therapist, occupational therapist, dietitian, social worker, teacher, and counselor, who often are not aware of what the other professional is doing and may provide discrepant information, is another challenge faced by families. Families experience the burden of this lack of coordination. The day-to-day strain of providing care and assistance leads to exhaustion and fatigue, taxing the physical and emotional energy of family members. There are a whole set of issues that create emotional strain, including worry, guilt, anxiety, anger, and uncertainty about the cause of the disability, about the future, about the needs of other family members, about whether one is providing enough assistance, and so on. Grieving over the loss of function of the person with a disability is experienced at the time of onset and often repeatedly at other stages in the person's life. Family life is changed, often in major ways. Caretaking responsibilities may lead to changed or abandoned career plans. Female family members are more likely to take on caregiving roles and thus give up or change their work roles. Friends, neighbors, and people in the community may react negatively to the disability by avoidance, disparaging remarks or looks, or overt efforts to exclude people with a disability and their families. Despite the passage of the Persons with Disabilities Act in 1995, many communities still lack programs, facilities, and resources that allow for the full inclusion of persons with a disability. Families often report that the person with a disability is not a major burden for them. The burden comes from dealing with people in the community whose attitudes and behavior are judgmental, stigmatizing, and rejecting of the disabled individual and his or her family. Let me tell you about the impact of disability on society. Socioeconomic status is often measured as a combination of education, income, and occupation. It is commonly conceptualized as the social standing or class of an individual or group. When viewed through social class lens, privilege, power, and control are emphasized. Socioeconomic status as a continuous variable reveals inequities in access to and distribution of resources. It affects overall human functioning, including our physical and mental health. Low socioeconomic status and its correlates such as lower education, poverty, and poor health ultimately affect our society as a whole. Inequities in wealth distribution, resource distribution, and quality of life are increasing in India and globally. Society benefits from an increased focus on the foundations of socio-economic inequities and efforts to reduce the deep gaps in socio-economic status. Persons with disability are likely to have limited opportunities to earn income and often have increased medical expenses. Disabilities among children and adults may affect the socio-economic standing of the entire family. It is estimated that 2.21% of the total population in India have some level of disability, and many of these individuals live in poverty. Although the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995 assure equal opportunities in education and employment for people with disability and prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability, people remain overrepresented among India's poor and undereducated. The existence of a disability can be the source of emotional maladjustment for individuals and the families responsible for their care. Individuals with disability and their families are at increased risk for poor health and quality of life outcomes when their disability status affects their socio-economic standing. Let me sum up. Contemporary society views the people with disability sympathetically but considers them to be unproductive and burdensome. It is a well-known fact that disability can have lasting impact on an individual. In addition to cognitive impairment, other characteristics of disabilities can create ambiguity and uncertainty for individuals and also their families. The course of a child's physical, psychological, and social development will forever be altered by the condition of disability. When disability sets in young adulthood, the person's personal, family, and vocational plans for the future may be altered significantly. When the onset of disability occurs to adults in their middle years, it is often associated with a major disruption to career and family roles. Disability places a set of extra demands or challenges on the family system, and most of these demands last for a long time. The onset of disability in old age is more expectable as bodily functions deteriorate. This decline in physical function is often associated with more depression. An older person may live for many years needing assistance in daily living, and the choices of where to get that assistance are not always easily made. Persons with a disability are likely to have limited opportunities to earn income and often have increased medical expenses. Individuals with a disability and their families are at increased risk for poor health and quality of life outcomes when their disability status affects their socio-economic standing. Let me sign off here and hope to meet you in some other session. Thank you.